They are data centers. This is an overlay.
Think about it as being a utility. I think about going to AWS.
It's not a new thing from him. It's just the article that I was reading was relatively recent.
What's going on, everybody? You're listening and watching the Daily AI Show. I'm saying this out of order. It's December 3rd, 2024. You know why? It's because I'm thinking of the old Budweiser commercial, the What's Up, and it messed me up, Jyunmi, coming into this. I talked about it before we started the show, and it messed me up coming into the intro. That's my own fault. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is December 3rd, 2024. You're listening, watching the Daily AI Show live. And with us today, we have Beth, Jyunmi, Andy, I'm Brian. And what we're talking about today is the idea of AI factories. What is that, you say? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. What would an AI factory be? It's not that they really exist today, but this comes from the CEO of Nvidia, Jensen Huang, who talks about this idea of AI growing to a point where the demand is so great that we think of it more like a utility, more like electricity being created, more like something that's on demand 24/7. And he uses the term AI factory for that because he said, I think that's kind of the closest thing we're talking about here. If you had something that was running 24/7, not really necessarily, we're going to dig into this, not necessarily a data center. It's kind of like the next version of a data center. And that's more of me putting that out there to you guys, not saying that as fact. Because as I read through his comments and some other blogs about it and trying to wrap my head around this to get ready for today, that's really sort of where I came away from it. It said, like, it's not a data center, but it's sort of like the data center's, newer model or something like that. And with that comes some interesting complexities, some interesting hurdles that need to be jumped over. So that's what we're talking about today. It's a really interesting idea. This idea of AI factories, the idea of AI being like electricity, like being a utility and having companies that provide that utility. And now you're a business. Are you paying for, just like you would pay to turn the lights on in your office? Are you going to pay to have 24/7 access to AI models, AI image generation, complex coding help, on and on and on. All right, Andy, go for it. Jump.
They are data centers. This is an overlay that's might be useful if you don't really understand how any of data center operations work or how electrical generation works. And you're trying to think, oh, smokestacks and factory. Oh, it's the second industrial revolution. This is part of Jensen's story. It's his vision. It's a good one. It's a transformation, and it's certainly that. It's just really changing the world and the way we operate. But what's literally delivering them, the factories as he refers to them, are the data centers he wants to put his chips in and orchestrate the advancement and efficiency of such data centers that deliver AI. But, AI is not like new a couple of years ago, right? AI has been served by regular data centers for a long time. Now we want, in order to run inference on these very large models and to train those models, we need much larger computing capacity. That's what's really shifting here. And he's a central part of that. Necessarily so for some period of time until lots of other supply chains end up disrupting the dominance of that company right now. Anyway, that's a separate topic.
So okay, I'm not pushing back. I don't have a pushback because I'm still trying to figure this out. But Beth, Jyunmi, jump in here. Like, I guess where I would say, Andy, that my impression was, yes, we do have data centers, and yes, they do produce to some extent 24/7 AI, for lack of a better word. But why distinguish it if he's really, is it him just trying to paint a better picture for Nvidia and there's more to this? Or like, why give it a different term like AI factory? Where I went with it, and I could be wrong on this, but my thought was, the current model at which data centers are created is sort of based off of current electricity and the way that we generate electricity in the States and around the world. And that's a mix of everything, right? All the different types of electricity, from renewable to oil and stuff like that. And that's not really, we know this. We know that's not a sustainable future for the increased demand. We can see the graphs. In fact, I just read an article about that showing where the demand for AI energy will be in like 2027. It's like 4%, and it's sitting at like 1.1 right now. So we know there's this exponential growth of energy demand. And I guess the way I looked at it, Andy, was like, oh, data centers as they currently sit are not capable of this future. So then what do? Do you go in and make new efficiencies on, the latest, equipment? Do you go in and make efficiencies on, what is it, Google TensorFlow? And they're more efficient, right? They're a more efficient way of running these chips and so on and so forth. I'm speaking outside my range here. But regardless, is it about going in and creating more efficient data centers to meet these future demands, whether that be with nuclear, whether, whatever that solution is? And is that more like what an AI factory is? I'd be wrong about that, but I'm curious to hear what you guys say.
So I had a long conversation with Perplexity about this because the article that we were that we were sort of basing this on is a more recent article, although Jensen Huang has talked about this vision for a while, right? So it's not a new thing from him. It's just the article that I was reading was relatively recent. And they mentioned 24/7 intelligence. And my sort of take on that was like, haven't we had 24/7 intelligence? Like, can't I ask AI right now any question I want 24/7? Couldn't before I asked the internet? And before that, couldn't I like look in an encyclopedia? Like the on-demand information seems like a weird thing to emphasize. And what Perplexity came back with was yes, but what this makes possible is on demand new AI intelligence, because what we're getting, right, with the book, less so with the internet, but definitely with AI, is a certain thing that has been defined as like up to this point, and we've tested it, and we've uh like red teamed it, and we've done all the things that now it's something that they can publish, right? Essentially, this is okay. And the on demand thing potentially means that it's being generated in the moment that you're accessing it, like electricity, like water, right? It's a utility. Like we used to go to the well, pick up a bucket. I didn't ever pick up a bucket, but it's like,
Not like utilities in that sense, because utilities don't customize every single delivery. Utilities have a single product that gets through. So there's a customization that's happening here. It's transmission of processed data. That's literally what a data center does, right?
okay.
So, but this is a really important signal that there is something global and transformative going on here. And what Jensen is pointing to is the scale of that. Because Google's building out their data centers, they're not sitting back. They're not using Nvidia chips necessarily, but they're using their own, right? And they're building data centers to support what? To support the increased demand of AI. But I don't think I don't have the research on this one, but I don't think that it's doubling the requirement in data center capacity in order to support AI, especially as models become more efficient and you don't have to do training on those data centers anymore.
So, but okay, so here, I don't know. Again, I'm listening to you guys, but right now, what you're saying, Beth, and I hear you, Andy, is I go to ChatGPT and I ask a question. You went to Perplexity, so did I, on this topic, because I wanted to get more information on it. I put in a query and I got an answer back, and it was on demand. It was available to me the second I asked it to be there. We can consider that to be always on, right? I didn't have to spin up new servers first and then ask my question. So I get what you're saying. But when we know that the future is not about us generating a new query, but AI agents all running, one company managing 3,000 AI agents and only having 3 human employees. We know the future is this, right? And so when I think about it as being a utility, I think about going to AWS, right? I think about going to like an on-cloud storage like an AWS, but instead of AWS providing on-cloud storage, they're providing me some sort of, I guess the way I look at it is like a utility where I'm able to run these agents, or I'm able to manage these agents as my 3 human employees. These agents that are running my business, and I pay AWS for that ability to do that 24/7 like I would electricity. In other words, if I don't pay my bill, I lose my 1,000 employees. And if I pay my bill, I'm running my businesses is at a high level of efficiency 24/7 because they never stop computing. They never stop figuring out problems. They're looking at every ad I have at all times, always. They're dynamically adjusting prices of my widgets and on and on and on and on. And they're all talking to each other. That has to exist at some crazy level. Somebody in AWS or whatever. That to me doesn't sound like a data center, but I guess I mean, if Andy, what you're saying is like, okay, but still at the end of the day, something has to be processing the data, and that's a data center. Call it what you want. It's a data center. So that's where I go back and forth is like, but isn't there this, what we know to be this future state where I am Brian and we have the Daily AI show or the Daily AI show, we have the organization or whatever, and the 4 of us are the 4 of us plus 1,000 AI agents. We got to be paying somebody for that utility. I guess that's where my brain is.
Yeah, well, companies will. That's what companies will do is they'll pay to have, a premium service that is around the clock. But I think much of the distribution of intelligence is going to get localized. So you're not going to call on data centers necessarily anymore. I mean, some professional capacities will want to have, API access, running, whether it's through a local app or, by, coding an API connection to a data center that's running AI. But I think AI is going to be able to do most of the things you need it to do without ever going out onto the web other than for additional information.
So you're ready to be on-prem. We're going to be going
Yeah,
back to
I think just for maybe for efficiency reasons overall and the distribution of this burden on the electrical generation capacity, I think it ought to be running just right here inside my Mac computer. Right, that AI that I have as my personal agent isn't running in the cloud. It's connected to the cloud. It has access via APIs to lots of different services out there. But you can see how there is a possible future where there isn't so much demand for central data centers actually processing intelligence because there's local versions of those models that are perfectly sufficient for most requests from humans.
See, and I think that's what he's really pointing towards, right? Down the line. Everything he said, of course, is identifying, yes, the demand will be so much more. We will need more sustainable power. We will need to build more data centers for capacity because we see what the trends are. But I don't know if this is just wishful thinking, but I think he's really touching upon, number one, using manufacturing as a framing, right? So that people who aren't necessarily in the AI space understand we are talking about generative processes, right? Whether that be AI to generate images, video, sound, all of those kinds of things. But beyond that, to generate additional AI, right? And so while we may have a influx or there might be the primary implementation from the user level with having AI on premise or on device, these new AI factories are going to be producing the AI that will live there, right? You're not necessarily developing new AI on your phone with your existing AI to make the new one that'll be on your phone. It could get to that point, but normally you'll need a huge amount of trading data and compute to get the new version and put it on there. So what the initial impression I got from reading what he was saying is that this is all about the generative aspects. We are going to make new of X. AI is the new widget that the factories are pumping out 24/7. Whether that just be new iterations of an existing one or just new AI for specific needs, right? Because we've seen trends where, hey, having a much smaller, having a much tighter trained data set for a particular AI can make it run far more efficiently and get better results or better metrics for doing that one thing. Now, times that by 10,000, right? You need the thing that's still going to make all of those. And I think that's what he's pointing to, really.
So is that just like a deeper or more expansive version of the AIs that we spin up, if not locally, not like through a data center all the time when we're creating a custom GPT or when we're like creating an automation that uses things and ultimately that will be like what is inside an agent. Right now we're not calling them agents because they're not agents, they're automations, but the idea is kind of the same. We have some functions that it needs to do and some AI prompts that run that then inform the next function that we're asking it to do. Is that what this ultimately is? It's just packaged in a way that you're not individually touching the parts, or is this something more powerful?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer. Like,
Yeah.
this is an interesting topic to me. I
Well,
really, 'cause I don't know.
Yeah, it certainly could go that route. I for an analogy, this is the first thing that struck my mind. Again, my mind automatically goes to the sci-fi realm. But in Star Wars, the way that these giant cities are built on all of these different planets with different environments is through droids. Droids is essentially embodied AI, right? So if you could imagine you had your robot, who's your AI, who makes a factory that makes other robots, that makes more factories that can build all of the buildings and all those kinds of things. This is more on a data sense, right? Less embodied, but it's the same kind of process, or at least that's how it struck me is, hey, we're going to create these essentially data centers, right? These compute centers that are going to make the new AI that's going to be used to design someone's product or make the more efficient data center or the more efficient power generator or those kinds of things, or even down to, hey, help me pick out my outfit for this morning, because it knows my personal taste. This is my personal tailor AI. So every task that you can imagine, you can have a specialized AI built to do that for you. Every individual will have their own version, which will be a net new or completely different AI that works just for them. And that's kind of how I see what he's talking about or what he's alluding to.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
go back to the article you're talking about, Beth, that we were all looking at. It's from TechSpot. I want to make sure I give them credit because they did write this article about this. But like you said, Beth, they point out that Jensen has mentioned this idea earlier. I think in the year is what they says in the article. But this paragraph is like sort of part of it, and then his quote after it says Huang's vision for AI factories 24/7 to produce AI outputs, whether it's language processing, image creation, or complex data analysis to meet the growing demands of businesses and consumers, represents a paradigm shift in how we think about computing, artificial intelligence, and computational resources in general. And then this was a quote: today, many AI services are running 24/7, just like an AI factory. And so we're going to see this new type of system come online. And I call it an AI factory because that's really as close to what it is. When we say generative AI, we're essentially saying that these data centers are really AI factories. They're generating something. And maybe that goes back to what you're saying, Andy, which is like he says it. These when we're saying generative, we're essentially saying these data centers are really AI factories. So maybe that answers. I mean, that's kind of answered my initial point to it. Yeah.
So I think it's really a clever PR campaign for
Scott is
the factories of the future. Like I think you should use that rather than AI factories, because AI factory, for me, it's conflated with, oh, I want an AI driven manufacturing operation, complete AI, one supervisor. That's an AI factory. Or it's making something physical that has to get shipped and people have to consume, other than screen time. Anyway, so
It's a good point. And I mean, like, look, that's what all this is more or less a well orchestrated PR move. And here's why. Nvidia is making the powerful chips that require a massive amount of energy in these data centers. And even I would say the public today, if there was surveys that went out, may have a generally negative impression about data centers, because data centers are typically, when they come up in the news, are about power consumption a lot of times. Yes, they do all these amazing things for us, and our insatiable appetite for what they produce is only growing, right? We're only going to want more AI stuff and more. We know this, right? And we know we're early adopters still. So what happens when the other 75% of the world wakes up or has the ability to have access to it? Obviously, demand is going to grow exponentially beyond that. So maybe this really is just a great way for Nvidia early on to get ahead of this and say things like, well, we're involved with data centers, but really what we do is we're part of AI factories. And these AI factories are more efficient and they're forward thinking and they're leaning on renewable energy. And we're going to be looking at nuclear technology and, small nuclear reactors and these types of things that Microsoft and others have said they're involved in. And they're be coming online in the next decade, whatever. Like maybe this is just an early way. It could just be an offhanded comment from him with nothing behind it. Or it could be just a subtle way early on of changing the narrative a little bit so that they're not having to say data center so much. And maybe we will start to hear him refer to them more as AI factories, which, if nothing else, will confuse the public. And public go, well, I don't know what an AI factory is, but data centers are inherently bad for energy consumption. I don't know what they're doing with AI factories. And Jensen Huang saying, like, it's the same thing, but we're just going to use this word over here because that sounds way better.
This PR approach actually, I think, is also reflecting their vertical integration ambitions around the delivery of inference, right? To homes, to factories, to systems, navigation systems, whatever. He wants to, and already does have, hardware domination, like in the chips that go into those data centers. Nvidia also provides services, I'm sure, that are for the engineering of the data center itself to ensure proper cooling and so on. And they have software to run data centers. So Nvidia is doing, I think, a land grab, if you will, in the public imagination, that they're the real driving force behind this new thing, which is an AI factory, which is a packaged data center. And so it uses a lot of NVIDIA services and products.
Yeah,
I mean,
I completely agree. They want to be the Kleenex of AI. Right.
The
Yeah,
ubiquitous.
it's like, hand me a Kleenex. You don't need a Kleenex. You need a facial tissue. But does anyone say facial tissue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Xerox, same thing, right? Yeah.
And just a minor point of clarity, just so that everyone is aware. NVIDIA designs everything, and they do create the hardware in design, implementation, software, support, all those kind of things. But the company that makes the physical chips is TSMC.
Is that right?
Yeah.
They're single point of failure. That's why I bring it up. In supply chain news, they're the ones who make everything. And it's pretty much
they're like a tech shorts that they're crazy percent house. So they don't in-house build the chips. Nvidia doesn't have factories.
No, nobody does. No. The only infrastructure. Well, I guess there's 3. Samsung's one of them, or whatever subsidiary. But the main chip manufacturer for the entire world is TSMC.
That's Josh. Yeah, I know we mentioned them before on the show.
But there is a Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company in Arizona. So it's not all in Taiwan.
It's it's the same company, and they're trying to open up another manufacturing hub there in Arizona. They have hit certain walls because the company culture, as we'll say, and the local populace don't.
Yeah, but there was an article that came out recently that said those have been that now it's on par production or even more like that. Yes, I think everybody I don't know who it was surprised, but Americans are not like people who live not in America. So
Yeah.
we generally do need a different approach. And
Yeah.
anyone who's watching us from another country, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know. But yes, that productivity thing I think is now more on par.
It is interesting, and what I was going to say too, and you guys probably, especially Andy and Jimmy, because it's much earlier for you guys, but I actually just threw this in. So, quick background, behind the scenes, curtain stuff for our listeners. Our show ideas, quite literally, are generated from us, and not AI generated, in a Slack channel called Show Ideas. So it's very, very inventive. The naming convention really, really nails it. But that's true, right? So like we all have ideas for shows, and there has to be somewhere to house them before they actually become shows. Quite literally this morning, and this is something we can bring up again tomorrow on the news, there was news that the CEO of Intel was fired. Why? For not developing into AI faster. That's like the answer. Which is interesting because you brought up like Kleenex or the idea of Xerox or these sort of like names that also mean the thing that they are, and they're just in common culture that way. Because I think there's a whole show to happen. This is what I was proposing, and maybe we can do it. Talking about how did Intel get caught flat-footed in the world of AI? Because Nvidia, Jyunmi, right, 2 years ago was just this chip or graphics card maker for when you wanted your computer to not freeze using Adobe or you were a gamer. Yep. Period. End of story.
Absolutely.
I'm talking about in the public. I'm not saying everybody. Like, yeah, I don't want to trade broad strokes. But if you're just me or a lot of people like me, it's like, I don't want Adobe to crash. How do I not get Adobe to crash? I'm going to need a better NVIDIA processor, like onboard RAM and the whole thing, right? Or I'm a gamer and I need one of the best video processing cards out there, right? To like onboard, this is important to me. And that obviously would always drive up the cost. Gaming computers for other reasons have higher end costs. NVIDIA was one of the things, if you were sort of building it on a Dell website or whatever the case may be, wherever you were putting that together, that was definitely somewhere where you were going to decide whether you were going to give it an extra $100 of your money. You're like, where was it going to go? So it's kind of crazy to me to see, for everybody, right? Especially the stock process, how much NVIDIA has changed in the world's public perception. And the inverse of that is Intel. And I think there's a really interesting maybe show, if you guys think it is, maybe our people in the comments can let us know, to talk about that sort of history and arc of Intel. Not to say they're dead and gone. They could turn things around too. But we used to talk about Intel like that. We used to say, and I was just saying this in the show idea thing, you used to basically tell your buddies how fast your computer was by quoting the Intel number. Before there was quad processing and all that, you would say it's an Intel yada, yada, yada. And people go, ooh, that's fast. Like, you don't really do that anymore. But when I was growing up, that's exactly how you told your buddies. That's how you flexed. That's how you told them you just got a new computer, is you quoted the Intel number. It was that important. And now here we are these years later, and we would more than likely quote in NVIDIA, or these big organizations would quote these, whatever they're called, Black Star, Death Star, whatever they call them. They're new chips. They always have a new name. So like now you would quote that to your buddies if you were a big organization, like, ooh, we have access to such and such, Anyway, go ahead.
For Gillette, just get to say it. Okay, go ahead, Andy. Sorry.
just going to say, dredging up the names of the Intel numbers as you're talking. Isn't Pentium one of those?
Pentium,
Pentium 5. And I don't know what the other lines were, but those would have been, in the parlance of people not so long ago.
Well,
You're saying Pentium, you're speaking like sweet nothings to me. I'm like, ooh, say it again. Pentium.
well, and not to spend too much time in nostalgia land, but it's
Yeah. Go ahead.
it's a time of period where we got to see the rise of, or the expansion of, the, for lack of a better term, the computer equivalent or the PC equivalent of hot rods, right?
Mm.
This is where everybody was like, oh, let's pump out as much performance as we can. Can we take this hardware to its, to the nth extreme? Yeah, my new case is submerged mineral oil. And it's like, what? Freeze components, all this other stuff. But I think the point is, number one, yes, I would like to do a show like you proposed for Intel and other situations like that, because I think the last couple of years for them does really explain. It's like not necessarily a comedy of errors, but it could just be a series of tragedies, and everything just dominates, compounds.
You need to do the research, right? I think that's what would be cool about it, is like, that's not a show you do tomorrow type of thing. I mean,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
but like, it's something we would have to do research on, because I'm genuinely curious, like, how did it get to yesterday where the CEO was fired? How did we, over the last several years, why did Nvidia rise, and why did Intel, excuse me, while watching the M1 chip come on board in 2020 or 2019 or whatever, and watching even Apple switch over from Intel to their M1 brand, the M brands of chips or whatever. I mean, this is like, they weren't shocked by AI. I mean, ChatGPT might have caught them off guard like a lot of people 2 years ago. But let's be honest, it's Intel. It's like saying IBM didn't know what was going on. Of course they did. So like, were they just too fat and happy? Were they too big to fail? I don't know the answer to this, by the way. Poor leadership. Somebody at the top that just didn't think AI was a big priority. There's got to be answers to this. I think it'd be really interesting to do that. And I just want to call out Justin, who said TSMC could be its own show as well. And I agree with that too. I think that would be another cool deep dive, is to talk about TSMC, because obviously I didn't know what you were just saying, Jimmy, that they were maybe not the only single point of failure, but clearly very, very important to the global chip design, and it being Taiwan makes it even more interesting and geopolitical and everything else. So I think that'd be really, really cool too. Yeah, there was another comment I wanted to bring in here too, because I think Cisco had said something too. Oh yeah, Cisco, we're talking about the Intel. Like, I remember those flexes, quad core, etc. He's like, nostalgia for Pentium. So yeah, I think, and Justin was saying Cisco, they had the best commercials back in the days. Yeah, Intel, like, I mean, think about it. You don't have to do it, but think about it. You could think of the tune in your head, the Intel tune. Like, you could sing it like I'm Loving It from McDonald's or something like that. It's like sort of baked in, So anyway, I think those are all good ideas. Thank you for the suggestion of TSMC or TM. Did I say it wrong? TSMC. Because I think that'd be a good show topic too. Okay, back to this, because let's kind of go for another couple of minutes on here. So what we sort of agreed on, I don't know if we agreed on, is that we're essentially talking about data centers. But now let's, like, maybe in this last couple minutes here, as we sort of get to the end, is like, if that's the case, but we also know that there need to be improvements in data centers in order to reach this future demand. What do you guys think needs to happen? Or did you do any research on, like, maybe what needs to happen for data centers in order to be that 2.0 version? Not necessarily calling it an AI factory. I mean, maybe you will, but like, what needs to happen to data centers? I think we sort of hit on, obviously, the energy supply. So we've definitely talked about nuclear. So maybe we don't have to hit that again. We definitely have talked about it in previous shows. But is there anything else that we're aware of that, like, data centers can make improvements to in order to sort of rise to that next 2.0 version?
Well, okay.
I'm going to just say that there is a software that is agentic software that will run in data centers, and it's advances in that kind of software and where the agency resides, where the intelligence for that agency resides. And so I think there does have to be a change to, like, how you have to have for memory shuttling in a chip, you have to have the parts very close together to reduce the time and the bandwidth of that memory channel between the two sides of the chip. That's really, really instructive about whether or not this thing's going to operate efficiently or not. And so there are companies that are changing the game in chip design and challenging Nvidia. Well, in data centers that are purpose built for AI services delivery, you're going to have companies that have built their own little partition of that data center. It's a cloud data center at its core, but now it's designed to launch AI-enabled applications. So the AI from this finance company that you're calling on through the browser and has agents, running around and is all the greatest advances kept up to date, just like any software as a service would be. But now you've got that little partition in there that's running that service, but it's right next to the models, right? It's literally right next to the models. So just like there's content delivery networks like Cloudflare, for example, that put your server information and data close to where the demand is and replicate that so there's multiple locations serving your application at the same time. And when I'm saying an application all the way up to and including, things like Bing, right? That's an application. So anyway, I think there's something that's going to happen in the design internally, but in terms of just the hardware requirements, they're just going to increase, right? The inputs requirements increase, the cooling requirements increase because there's so much more continuous processing, like at a really high occupation of GPUs. You have CPU utilization. It's like, oh, I'm fine. I'm still at 20%. Start to get to 100%, you're overtaxing your system and it's going to start to fail in certain ways. Well, the capacity has to be there. And I know I'm rambling here, but so there's going to be changes to the hardware and the configuration of data centers, but it's really more in the software and how the agents kind of navigate through those environments that I think is a bigger change.
I agree. I think the software is definitely going to be the control system, right? And what is used there to find the most efficiencies, and it's this rerouting kind of supply problem that they're really solving. I think there will be a significant infrastructure impact. I'm hoping that through their own use of AI in their design, that they'll find a fine balance between performance and maybe specialization. So data centers now just do everything, right? Everybody's got their own little either physical hardware space or virtual machine space to do whatever they're trying to accomplish. But if through specialization of the structure or the data center, they can get more efficiencies that way, I would love to see like how sort of what some people did for crypto and blockchain, where they built their compute centers up north, right? Just in the frozen wastes, so to speak, to take advantage of the natural environment to provide the necessary cooling. Of course, that comes with its own challenges about infrastructure to and from, power generation, all those kinds of things. I think all of those factors will be larger factors. But what I'm hoping is that if they can find a fine balance between specialization for different components or different processes, they'll have different data centers to accomplish those. And those will be most in line infrastructurally, energy consumption wise, environmentally. These are all these big check marks. And of course, there's going to be that societal impact and things like that. Again, these are, this would be great. Well, let's see what actually happens versus how much does it cost and where's our profit margin. So we'll see.
So one of the I agree. And And actually, Brian, you said nuclear. I had a big conversation about like, okay, talk to me about underground data centers where you can you can make use of the cooling. I've actually, Carl and I have joked, not joked about they should be building all these in Canada, right? Like, come on. But
Okay, I have an idea after that. Go ahead.
but also, nuclear has a built-in amount of time that it takes to spin up, and it's much longer than solar or wind. Solar and wind also don't have the waste kind of products. I know that there are challenges with all of them, but the fact that we've talked about nuclear, I think, doesn't necessarily mean we've talked about all of the options for this. But the other thing is one of the theories or one of the plans that I have heard in terms of making AI more efficient is building an AI that is capable enough to create the plan for specialized knowledge. Because right now, right, when you ask ChatGPT something, you're spinning up the whole, like you're turning all the lights on in the entire school, right? Like every light goes on, and now there's one student in one room who has like part of a thought that's coming out to get you, right? And so there is an efficiency in that level. What gets spun up, what gets spun up, and that and we needed an AI, and we do need an AI. I think the idea was that AI will eventually build an AI that's capable of processing what that infrastructure should look like within the AI, so that it's not bringing the entire hammer, all the lights on, those sorts of things.
Well, you mentioned spin, so may I present to you Spin Launch? You guys can see this on the screen, right? It's not showing it on me. No, it didn't share, did it? 1 second. Let me try again. Share. Oh, okay. Be slow about it. Fine, be that way. Spin Launch. Have you guys seen this before? Have you seen Spin Launch? So basically, the idea is you use a centrifuge, and you have a payload that you want to send to space, and you get it going uber fast, and then you see the little chimney. It's not there. You go. See the little chimney there. When it gets to the right speed, it blasts through a little membrane that's holding the vacuum in there, and then right there, right where you're seeing on the screen, and then it shoots that thing right up into space. Now, I don't know if they've made things successfully into orbit yet, but clearly this exists. Spin Launch is a company. They're very, very serious about this working and getting low, not like super heavy payloads, very, very cost effectively up into space. Now, put this together with the fact that space has an average temperature of something like -400, but that varies widely between like radiation and dark side of the moon and so on and so forth, right? But it's mostly empty, well, space. So combine small data center payloads with Spin Launch, send them up to space where it's awful cold, and now you've created a super efficient way to keep your data centers cool. And of course, you have to work. Now you've got to get the data from the data centers orbiting in space, but that seems like a lesser problem with being able to beam data back down. It may not be immediate data, but I think you send these things up like parts of a train, and you connect them together, and you have data centers orbiting the Earth in low orbit access or whatever, and they are as cool as they need to be for as long as they need to be cool because it's space. So I don't know. I think I feel like I've solved it. So you guys just let me know.
That is a great idea, Brian. I love it. These folks are in the early days of creating a mass driver, because that's essentially what a mass driver does. Is it flings a mass of something somewhere, right? So, and I think you've just touched upon, and don't be surprised if Elon snags your idea, because I mean, he would Starlink. What you're talking about is like a scaled up version of Starlink, but for all data centers, right? They're in those big diamond patterns that float around up in space. Lots of check marks. I'm with you, Brian. You get the funding, we'll build it.
You can make them into cool shapes, so that way when you look at them in the dark night sky, you can look up there with your kid and be like, look, kiddo, that's the such and such AI factory in space.
how big is the nuclear reactor that you're sending up with this thing to power a data center? Because I don't.
Well, that's the beauty of it, right? Just solar panels.
It-
Like JSW, you know, solar panels.
You consume. Yes, thank you, Jimmy, for solving that problem too. What? Very handy.
Each one is a giant LED box, so that you can spell and stuff like that, and there could be just messages that are sent out. That's how you pay for it. It's just going to be a giant billboard up in
Listen,
space.
we have drones, right? So you strategically place these over a really important game like the Super Bowl or whatever. Then these commercials of these companies, they go, everybody now look up in the sky. there'll be a data center drone show way up in space, and people ooh and ah, and they'll pay for that, for that those naming rights or whatever it might be.
Have gone off the rails.
Where are you?
There's no bad ideas here, Andy. No ideas are crap ideas.
I shouldn't have spoiled the brainstorm.
And mentality with this, Andy.
Yes, and you come just go. Right?
Not too far though.
Or not.
Gets hot. Okay, we'll leave it here.
Right. It's in between so many feet down, right?
That's right.
No, but I just imagine this is also could be the largest, like Elon could turn Starlink or anything that's a satellite up there into the largest jumbotron ever.
Yep.
Because jumbotrons are essentially that's what they are. They're pixels that can do different lights. If it's wide enough, then you can have the biggest screen TV ever, and everyone can watch. The next
Message will be OpenAI sucks with an X. People are like, oh man, Elon, once again you definitely won. You let us down, Elon. God, you're so childish. All right, we're gonna wrap it up there. Really interesting conversation. I love this idea. I love this idea that maybe it's a PR move. Maybe there's something more to this. But if hey, AI factories, maybe that'll be the term we use and not data centers. Who knows? Who knows? He's got a lot of pull at Nvidia, so who knows if this won't be the common term here in the next year or two, and you'll think to yourself, wow, we call those AI factories, and the Daily AI Show we're the first persons to bring that to us, first people to bring this to us. Okay, tomorrow we got the news, as always, on Wednesdays. We'll talk about Intel on there because that was a news story that came up, so we'll mention that again tomorrow, and maybe we'll have some fun with the news shows as we've done before, where we try to keep it going with speaking of spin, right? And moving on. Thursday, we're going to be talking about NCP, Model Context Protocol. It's a game changer for AI applications. It's really, really interesting. MCP has been in the news a lot, if you follow this stuff. And we, like always, we like to give it a little bit of time. We're not necessarily always trying to be first. We want things to evolve a little bit. We like a couple articles come out so we can wrap our heads around it before we come out talking about it, so that we're giving you guys something a little bit more formed. So that's why we're going to do MCP on Thursday. And then Friday is actually a 3-week recap, because we typically will do a bi-weekly recap, and we just didn't have one. I think maybe because of ChatGPT 2 turning 2. So that'll be our 3-week recap, which means we'll have all sorts of topics to talk about on Friday. That's what's coming up the rest of the week. Don't forget, you can sign up for our newsletter for free. All you have to do is go to the dailyaishow.com and you will see a sign up on there. It goes out every Sunday at 8 a.m. And that list is growing pretty good right now. It's actually moving pretty well. So thank you to everybody who has already signed up for it. And if you like these types of conversations, that's where you can find more of them that go above and beyond what we always talk about due to time constraints and all sorts of reasons on the show here. That's it. Have a great day, guys, and we will see you again tomorrow for the news.